Greetings, brethren. Hausburger Donkey here with another update for the Wargamers Anonymous November Challenge, which is troops. And I've been painting on these zombies a little bit. I haven't not done very much, but there were some questions as to how my process works for the speed painting, and I don't have like a full thing. I want to do a tutorial on the whole process at some point, but just to give a quick overview. So this is where I start with the miniatures. It's just okay, should work. So this is where I start. I prime them completely white, and then I wash the entire figure in Agrax shade or any dark brown wash. So if you have strong tone from Army Painter, or you can make your own. For example, I have my very own brown and black washes. I've used them for a while, so as you can see, brown and black washes. And I would probably mix these half and half. This is made with burnt umber ink, and it's not quite dark enough by itself, I find. So I'd usually add some black to it. Yeah, wash the entire figure. Don't let it pool too heavily. Use it as you would use your washes normally. So make sure that it is in the recesses, but it's not pooling too heavily. And then once that's done, I don't think I have one that's actually just washed that I can show off, because I usually then immediately go to the next step, which, as I said, is dry brush the whole figure white. And this one is one of the zombies with the painted skin. But as you can see here on the back, I hope that's clearly visible, I dry brushed the whole thing with regular white paint. I really like using the Vallejo model color white because it's very stark, highly pigmented white. And what it does is it gives you a pre-shaded effect, which you would also get from a zenithal highlight with an airbrush. But instead of it being all from the top, it's just based on the actual recesses of the miniature. And the effect, and I don't know if you can really see it, but you can kind of see it at the back, it also gives sort of a slight texture effect from the dry brushing. And that makes a great sort of undercoat if you want to have dirty looking figures. For example, I've painted all of my Dark Age figures for Saga like this, and it just looks beautiful because it makes them look a bit more dingy. Not necessarily dirty, but it just tones everything down a bit. All right, and what I did with these zombies, let's get another one, is I painted over the skin with Reikland Flesh Shade from Citadel. And when you paint over the first layer of Reikland Flesh Shade, it might look a bit, bright to you for the skin tone. But then what I do is I go over it, or I went over it in this case, with Chthonian Camo Shade. And I think that gives a wonderful sort of dead zombie flesh effect, where it's just sort of starting to go brown, greenish, and nasty. And where they had exposed bone, I used one of the new contrast paints, the Skeleton Horde, and I think it actually looks great. I don't think I'm going to do anything else to the bone. I think it looks just fine. I think I also went over the bone, or on one of them that had an exposed skull, I think I went over it with Chthonian Camo Shade as well. I don't know if that's this one. Yeah, but that's basically all I'm going to do to the skin, because at the end I'm also going to, where he has these sores and wounds, I'm going to put some blood effects, very mildly, and I also want to put some blood effects on the clothes, so that'll come at the end, and that'll be enough. I don't think they need anything more for the skin. But what I wanted to do now is show off how I paint the rest of the figures, because like next time I make a video, I'm already going to be mostly finished. Because they don't have a lot on them, so it's going to be a pretty quick process. So what I have on my palette right now is right here. This is Vallejo Panzer Aces Dark Rust, and this right here boop, if you can see it here on the left, this little dot, that's Vallejo Panzer Ace's track primer. And I like the Panzer Aces range for this specifically because it's a bit more highly pigmented, and which means when you thin it down, it becomes a little blotchy, and that's actually even better. For me, this has worked best, this technique, with Vallejo paints. Every now and then I'll use other manufacturers, but the Vallejo paints just they have a certain sort of grime to them when you water them down, which I like. So I'll just water down this dark rust, and we're going for a pretty thin consistency, much thinner than you would usually paint with. So I can show that on my finger. You can see this is very thin, right? And then what I do is I wipe off most of the paint on my trusty paper till there's almost nothing coming off. Oop. And then with the dark rust, I'm going to go over his belt. See that I'm in the camera. Oop. And then I just paint on a thin layer of brown. And I want it to be translucent. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a perfect glaze. It doesn't matter if it pools a little bit, but we want to have almost a glaze. Some more. Wipe off most of it. As you can see there, it's pooling a little bit, but that's okay. And I'm going to put that over the whole belt. It's a bit too much. So we're just sort of putting a tint over the original color. And as you can see on the back, it's already dry again. So I'm going to go over it with a second pass. And if you had any shoes, I would go over those again as well. Paint them in the same brown. And there we go. That's pretty much all I'm going to do to his belt. As you can see, it put down like a very translucent layer of paint, and all of the pre-shading that we did is still in place. Now I'm going to take a different guy and we're going to go over a slightly bigger area. Which one? Let's go for... does any one of these have pants? Not really. Alright, let's just go over the whole tunic then. So, again, we're putting some water with the track primer. I like track primer as a color for the clothes because it's sort of like a grayish brown, and done right, it looks pretty excellent for clothes, sort of like dirty peasant clothes. And this process it's very similar to doing a wash. It's just you don't want as much on your brush. You want less paint on your brush. Actually watered this down a little bit too much for my liking, so I'm going to have to do a second pass. And the one downside to this is you have to work kind of quickly because the paint dries and then it gives different... put some on the belt. And then it puts different sort of... strengths of the color on, and we don't really want that. And put some on the bottom here as well. Get some more. Finish off the sleeve. And you do have to kind of try and be somewhat neat with this, because you don't want to go over the other areas too much, since we want the pre-shading on those to still work when we get to them. So you have to try and not let it bleed over too much. But if it does, it's fine. It won't really show that much in the end if you don't have too many mistakes. Go over there. And the thing with this painting technique, if you do it for something that's not a zombie, if you do it for something that's more like a regular historical figure or something like that, I recommend doing this on all of the clothes and leather areas, but then spending more time on the skin and making the skin sort of a regular 3-layer thing, you know, so a base layer, a mid-tone, and a highlight. And that should ensure that, that the figure at the end looks sort of impressive. Whereas with these zombies, I don't think it's going to matter too much. They're just going to look dirty, and that'll be fine. Kind of have to wait a little bit till it's completely dry so I can go over with the second layer. But you can also already see, I mean, this is already, you know, if I wanted the tone to be a bit lighter, I mean, this is already fine, right? And it just tinted everything a bit in this sort of gray-brown, but you still have the lovely shading that the wash and the dry brush did beforehand. And the texture put down with the white dry brush, you can see it here pretty well, it sort of gives it a sort of a cloth texture. So it just, without any work at all, it sells the effect of this being clothes. Kind of screwed up the sleeve there a bit. Oh well, that's fine. Okay. I'm gonna go over the bottom half again in a second, and I just need to wait for it to dry a little bit. Usually, obviously, I would take one color and then go through the whole lot and paint, you know, something else every time. So I wouldn't always do the tunic. Maybe on the next one, I would use the track primer to do the little hood thing, or the pants leg, or even a belt somewhere, or some boots, or a hat. But I usually will try to pick about 5 colors for the cloth and leather stuff, and then repeat those over on the entire lot. So in this case, because the skin has this sort of brown greenish tone, I want to avoid having sort of a brown greenish tone on the clothes. So the clothes will probably be more toward red and yellow, maybe even some grimy blue. Yeah, just to give a bit of a contrast. All right, I think we're good now. I think I can go over, yeah, okay, I can go over it again. So I'm gonna take some more paint. Well, I'm almost out. That should still be fine. Put on a second layer just to make this one a little bit darker. And I might also not do a second layer on other models in the unit, and that gives even more color variety. Because, I mean, as you can see, the first layer is already fine. Doesn't really need a second one. I just want him to have a darker tunic. And to sort of show off how the technique works. And I realized I didn't really show the washing and dry brushing process for the whole figure, but that process is kind of tedious, but it really doesn't take very long. So if you can sit your way through that process and just wash them all and then dry brush them all, this is probably one of the fastest ways of painting your figures, because, I mean, as you can see, this didn't take 5 minutes, right? And I'm painting or trying my best to paint in front of a camera, which means I'm much slower than I would usually be. And see, looks great. And that's all we're gonna do to this guy's tunic. It'll be done. And then once everything else on the figure is painted, he'll just look great. And then we'll put on some dirt spatter maybe and some blood spatter, and yeah, they'll be painted in absolutely no time because these are really, really simple to paint figures. So where was the other guy with the belt? There's the guy with the belt. And there you go. And you can do this with pretty much any colors. You just have to remember that because of the white undercoat and the thin layer that you put on there, it does kind of end up being a lot brighter than you usually would have the paint. So you want to take darker colors, because if you take something bright like I don't know, what do I have here? Like for example, this beige I have here, that will barely register. If you want to have a beige, you kind of almost need a sort of a dirty light brown, and that will make a beige. So yeah, it's very similar to when you use the dipping method in terms of how you have to choose your colors, where you have to just go a little bit darker than usual, or a little bit lighter, I should say, because it tones it down. This is the other way around. All right, that's all I wanted to show. Hope that sheds some light on how I do this painting technique. And I really think it's a great time saver, and especially for historical figures. It's an excellent way of painting your models, because it does without much work, it just tones all the colors down and makes them a little bit more realistic and not so incredibly bright and vibrant as you would want in fantasy figures maybe. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you liked it, and I'll show you when I'm done with all the cloth areas how the unit looks, and then lastly will be all the sort of metal bits, and yeah, and then some last touches such as dirt and blood spatter, and then the basing, and then they'll be good. All right, take care, guys. Looking forward to your updates and your videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.